looking back in the history, not only has it been 3.5 years since I started this YouTube channel, it also means, well, this control panel, for want of a better term, is also 3.5 years, because this actually debuted in, I think it was actually my second ever video, and you know what, it's done really well. It has obviously had a few changes. There's a couple of holes here that no longer have wires going through them, and these panel meters clearly, well, they've been removed some time ago, and in fact this one here doesn't seem to work at all. The timers work well. Some of the LEDs on these switches have given up. Those two, those are both on, but the LEDs aren't illuminating anymore. And this ammeter over here is, well, a bit loose to say the least. But other than that, I can't really complain. But now it's 2019, perhaps it's time for a facelift and a few more mod cons, shall we say. Now, you may remember in the past I've used one of these here in the shed, and this is the Sonoff SV. This is the safe voltage version of the Sonoff basic switch, which is just a single relay, just switches one device, but it connects up to your Wi-Fi and forms part of a home automation system. There's all sorts of different devices now from the Sonoff brand, but this is one of the most basic, a 12 to 24 volt switch, which is based around the ESP8266. You can see the antenna there, and there's just a single button on it. There are a couple of breakouts of the GPIO on this version, which is quite handy, but this one works off 12 or 24 up to 24 volts and can switch the same voltage. But these aren't particularly practical because there's just one relay on it. So I found a bigger brother, and in fact a new to me at least product, the Sonoff 4Ch Pro R2, and this one comes in this box here, and as you can see from the box, which comes out upside down, it's well, it's a 4-channel Pro Sonoff system, and straight away down at the bottom you can see, although it can work on well, 90 to 264 volts AC, there's also a 5 to 24 volt DC input, which is actually broken out to a 2.1 5.5 mil jack, and then there are 4 relay connections under here. Each relay has a common, a normally open, and a normally connected connector. So yes, this is a 4-channel version that will work at the same voltage as I use in the shed here, 12 volts, and I think this might be a lot neater to replace a few of those switches and that timer on my control panel. Now, the manual is fairly brief, to be honest, because it works in the same way as all the other Sonoff devices when they come out of the box. You download this app, eWeLink, from the Apple or Android store, and you connect it to your Wi-Fi, and well, I've covered that in another video, and I don't intend to cover it again now, but the manual does show the internals of the Sonoff 4-channel Pro, so clearly they do expect you to get inside this, because there is a clearing button, a work mode switch, a delay line switch, so there are various parameters you can set on the inside of this device, and their values here are set out in these tables. So without further ado, let's get inside. There are just 4 recessed screws to remove to get into the unit, but I'll do that in a second. But from the back here we can see there is this slot inside the case, and these 2 clips which lift up, and that is of course so that this can be mounted on a DIN rail, and here's some standard DIN rail, and I don't know if that's what makes this unit pro, because obviously DIN rail is used in quite a lot of electrical installations, and here in the shed holding up my 7S20p pack, so that is pretty useful, I think. With the 4 screws removed, the top just pops straight off. And there's the inside, the 4 buttons on the left hand side, 4 relays across the bottom. Looking at those relays straight away, they're branded golden GH1C5L, 10 amps 250 volts, 12 amps 125 volts, and no mention of DC whatsoever, which is a bit of a shame, because I was hoping to use them to switch DC, but to be honest, I'm only probably pulling 1 or 2 amps at 12 volts, so I suspect they'll be okay. Perhaps I'll look up the data sheet later, but yeah, that 5 to 24 volt input, wasn't it? There's the AC input there, which does seem to have plenty of protections on it, a fuse, etc. there, and there's also some holes cut in the PCB here to separate the low and the high voltage, so that looks, well, pretty good, I'd suggest. 4 LEDs down the right hand side for the status of those outputs. There's the ESP8266 and its antenna up there, but there's also another microcontroller there. That is a STM32, and presumably that controls some of the other functionality in here, because also there's this piece of wire which I suspect is the antenna for the 433 megahertz communication on here as well, and there's a crystal there, 6.7458 megahertz, I'm guessing, because you can also buy an RF remote for these as well, which I have also done, and I think that must slide, yes, there it does, and you get an ABCD button for the 4 different relays, so you can communicate with this over 433 megahertz as well. And oh, this came with a battery in it, that's pretty good. So 4 buttons there, 4 relays, so you can control your loads using a key fob, your mobile phone or tablet or what have you over the Wi-Fi, or the buttons on the front. So this is pretty versatile. One thing I am very interested in is finding out how much this Sonoff uses just idly sitting there, how much current it consumes while it's not doing anything. So I've got my Porta-Pow meter here, and if I plug in the Sonoff, there's a blue LED flashing down there, and looking at this meter, we can see, well, it's consuming about 50 milliamps, which is quite high, isn't it? I guess the Wi-Fi is busy transmitting there at the moment, and perhaps that might reduce, but yeah, my batteries are sat at 12.6 volts, which isn't too bad at this time in the evening, but 50 milliamps, we'll have to see if, well, we're happy with that. And what happens when we pull in those relays as well? So if I turn them on, press the button, you can hear the click. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Before we've attached anything whatsoever with the 4 LEDs on, the relays pulled in, we're using 200 milliamps. That's 2.5 watts. That's more than I would have hoped, to be honest. Now, out of the box, the RF remote does not work with the Sonoff 4 channel. So to pair it, you have to double click quickly the channel and then press the button, and that has now paired that button with that channel, and that's working well. But of course the B button's not doing anything, the C or the D button either, so actually you could potentially use this across different units and only have one of the channels being controlled by this RF remote and another unit being controlled by the B button. You can seem to be able to mix and match, so that's quite nice, I think. But yes, you do need to double click the channel and then press the button that you're attaching, and then it works. Excellent. And I think this button here in the middle clears that memory, so if you press and hold for a few seconds, hopefully that will clear the memory of presumably this ST microcontroller, and then yes, A button doesn't do anything again, so double click, double flash, press that button. Yeah, that seems pretty straightforward and seems to work quite nicely. I've zoomed in a bit closer here so that we can see the settings on these switches to look at the various different modes we can place these relays into, and that is all explained here in this table, but there's three modes: interlock, self-locking and inching, and from the brief explanation I found, well, I was a little bit confused what each of those meant. So first things first, S6 is set to 1, which means it's in this self-locking or inching mode, and with all of these dip switches set to on, well, that means it's in self-locking mode. Just as we saw before, if I press relay 1 it turns on, I can press relay 2 and that will turn on as well, and I can independently control these relays. So that is self-locking mode. Now there is a note in the manual to say disconnect the power before changing these switches, so that's exactly what I will do. Now with S6 0, we're in interlock mode, so if I press the first relay, that should turn on, but if I press this second relay, well, it flips over, it turns off the first one and turns on the second one, and that's the same for all the LEDs. When you turn on another relay, it turns off any of the other relays, so you can only have one on at any one time, and to turn that one off, well, you just press the button again and all of them are off. But yes, primarily the interlock mode means that only one can be on at any one time. So if I disconnect the power again, switch S6 back over to 1, and we'll turn channel 1 on this dip switch over here to off and replace the power. Now we're in the inching mode, I believe, or should I say at least relay 1, channel 1 is in the inching mode. The other three relays are still in the self-locking mode. So what's the difference? Well, in inching mode, I can turn on the first relay and it stays on, and I can independently turn these other relays on and off because they're not in the inching mode currently, but this relay should automatically switch itself off. There it goes, just on the right moment, and that's because the other dip switch here is set to all zeros, which means there is a time delay of 16 seconds. So when I press relay 1 now, it will turn on for 16 seconds and then switch off. So that can be handy, I guess, for a door contact or something like that. But now I'm going to remove the power and turn all these back to where they were so that this works in its default out of the box mode when I attach it to the wall now in the shed. Well, I think I've decided at the moment at least I'm going to leave these switches in place, the ones that do all the lights here in the shed. Two of them I'm not going to obviously transfer to the Sonoff because there are 6 channels here, as it were, and I've only got 4 on the Sonoff, but I'm not going to mount it here for the moment. Call me sentimental if you will. At the moment it's mounted there above the control panel, and I just need to start getting loads wired in, so I just need to disconnect the wires from the back of these switches and work out a way of getting them into these relays. Now the wires connect to the back of these switches on these crimp terminals, and I'm going to leave them on because I might go back to using switches, we'll see. So I've made up these cables now with another crimped on terminal, which will easily just plug into there, and then that's just got a bit of bare wire here on the end, and that will go into my relay in the Sonoff. So I just need a bit of tape around here to insulate it and make sure it's not going to touch anything it shouldn't, and then I think that will be okay for now. Now the Sonoff 4 Channel Pro is up on the wall. I have power and it's connected to the Wi-Fi. And here's my first load. This is going to be tricky with one hand, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do this one-handed. So there we have it, 3 loads connected with the positive going into the common pin on each of the relays, and then the load connected to the normally open pin, and that should work fine. As you can see, channel 2 is on and that's giving us some light, but channel 1 can switch on and turn on another light as well, so that seems to be working well. I should point out that each of these lives coming into those common pin, each one has its own individual fuse, so this should be relatively safe. So for completeness, I will just show that I can obviously turn these lights on and off using the eWeLink app and over the Wi-Fi, and that's great because you wouldn't believe how many times I lock up this shed and think, did I switch those lights off? Well, now I can just check the app. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe down below, comment if you can, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.